Man, this is going to be such a fun project. I'm glad we have a minute to cross our lives together. I have got so much gratitude for just being here in this moment. And what I mean by that is, I started looking back the other day. I was looking at some old metrics and some of the Mossberg Rugged American Hunter series that I had done. I had to write some things down for just on it's a long story, but I was looking at some former projects I had done in the past, and I was like, holy cow, man. I would have had no idea when my daddy first took me hunting when I was a little boy that I would get to meet all the people I've gotten to meet and go the places I've gotten to go and be a part, sometimes a small part and sometimes maybe a little bit bigger part of different projects that share the gospel with hunters over the last several decades. And gosh, it's kind of humbling, man. And but in that, you learn a lot, you see a lot. I have had an intense privilege of getting to speak at men's events and retreats and wild game dinners across the country, and you get to observe a lot of things. And so I just wanted to reflect on some of that and really try to help. I think help us reach more hunters. So here's how I got my start. You probably don't know much about me, but I got my start in actually writing. I started writing in the hunting industry. I think I tell a story somewhere in this journey about how I got started doing that. It's kind of funny. I'll let you encounter that here in a minute. But as I got into writing a little bit, I was young in ministry. I was in my mid-20s, and I began serving a church, and we actually hosted a wild game dinner. I wanted to do that. You started hearing about wild game dinners starting to come back, and I wanted to try to reach some hunters. My church was in an area with a ton of hunters, and so we did that, and so all of the things that I did in the outdoor industry really came a lot later. But I got involved doing men's ministry really right out of the gate in my early ministry career. And I learned a lot from, ministering to men. And people ask me all the time, how did you do this, Jason? Or how did you get to do this? Or how did you get to do that? And truthfully, I didn't have a golden plan. Like if you had ever told me I would have gotten to be able to do a Bible for hunters, and much less two of them, I would have been like, no way, how do you do that? I didn't start out with that kind of plan. I just didn't. I really do believe when it comes to ministry, you can build the plane while you fly it. And what I mean by that is, you want to have a plan, but if you look at what Jesus did with a lot of his disciples, I mean, you don't hear him saying, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to go across the lake, and then when I do, we're going to encounter a man in Gerizim. We're going to heal a demon, and we're cast a demon out, and then we're going to go back across the lake, and I'm going to heal a woman who's been bleeding, and then I'm going to calm a storm. And by the way, after that, now I'm going to send you out, and we're going to go, and you're going to go out into the cities, and you're going to start ministry there. And then after that, he didn't do that. Jesus called us to follow, and so I just say start, man. I'm a big believer in stop talking about it and just go do it, man. And so I got my start after I had, written some things and, done some things in the speaking world. I just wanted to help churches get inside the mind of a hunter. And so I called a man named Gene Williams at the Tennessee Baptist Convention. And that was a long time ago, and hadn't talked to Gene in a long, long time. But Gene was working for the Tennessee Baptist Convention at the time. And he and I kind of partnered together, and we just began helping churches of all sizes kind of band together to reach more hunters, because hunting is not a hobby. And if churches and pastors could understand that, it's an obsession. Mossy Oak nailed that. They really did. Mossy Oak nailed that. It's not a passion. It's an obsession. It is not a hobby. It's something that comes from deep in their bones. And if churches could see that there are all these missionaries that are just in the making, waiting, I really believe there'll be an access to a whole new world that pastors don't have access to. Pastors don't have, I've pastored several churches, and as a general rule, a pastor doesn't have access to the duck blind. He doesn't have access to the deer camp. He doesn't have access to ice fishing and things that people do, and, the bass fishing club and whatever. But hunters do, and they're stepping into worlds that most churches don't really have, an entryway. So that is my heart behind it. So it's a beautiful day here. I got my duck dog Stella laying over there in the corner, and I'm just going to walk you through some things I've seen over my life, and hopefully it'll help you, craft some better ministry decisions and better ministry outcomes for what you're doing.
So right out of the gate, let's talk about working with your pastor. Chances are your pastor's not a hunter. In fact, I've met very few pastors in my life that I would consider an actual hunter. And what I mean by that is not some dude that has, shot a shotgun somewhere. It's amazing how men are, they don't want to admit, oh yeah, I've run a chainsaw, or oh yeah, I know I've done that. We just don't want to lose face. But truthfully, most pastors are not hunters. And every now and then some are. They may have gone squirrel hunting, but that doesn't mean they are a guy that knows the difference between, mossy oak, shadowgrass habitat and, bottomland timber versus real tree, AP green or whatever patterns out there right now. So, just know that. But let's talk about working with your pastor. I would say, and by the way, while I'm on that topic, there is a free ebook at jasoncruz.com that is called Pastoring Hunters. If you click on I think it's under the tools, it may be under the tools or the resource section, but if you go to my website, you can get that. And it costs you nothing, and churches and state conventions and denominations have sent that out over the years and in different shapes and forms. But right now it's in a PDF, and it's just there. It's simple. He can read it in 15 minutes at the most, maybe less. But it's some insights into the world of hunters. And so but start with your pastor. Always start there, because for one thing, he knows where the landmines are within your church, if you're doing this through a church. And so that's going to help a lot. I would say be prepared to find a way to have to fund this on your own. I mean, you're going to have to bootstrap it. Now, sadly, one of the biggest heartbreaks that I've had in my lifetime is watching churches have very little funding for men. And this is what I don't get, right? The statistics show, I actually did my doctoral research on reaching hunters. So I actually have a D.Min in leadership, a doctorate of ministry in leadership, but my dissertation was on reaching hunters. And I had to do a monumental amount of research, as you could imagine. But it's fascinating how few churches have any budget at all for men's ministry. But here's what drives me crazy. Okay, so if you look at the numbers, if we're going to honestly be so metric driven, well, here's the fascinating reality of that research. If you reach a woman, let's start with children. If you may know this statistic, but if you don't, here it is. If you reach a kid for Christ, if somehow your church reaches a child for Christ, you have an 8% chance of getting that family into Christ by going through the kid, because they were the front door. If you reach a woman for Christ, you have roughly a 15% chance of reaching the whole family through that woman. So 8% for kids, 15% for women. Do you want to know what the return is if you reach the man for Christ? 92%. You have a 92% chance of reaching the family if you reach the man. And it seems like every time I go speak at a men's conference or a wild game dinner, you'll hear somebody say, we know that if you reach the man, you reach the family. Okay, you know what? That's true. But here's what is equally true. Nobody's paying attention to that, and they're not funding it that way. Churches, I think it is honestly an abomination that there's not a men's ministry budget in every church. If we know, let me ask you, if you went up to a venture capitalist right now, just pick somebody in your community that's a venture capitalist, and you went up there and you said, hey, I've got an investment strategy. I've actually got 3 investment strategies. One has a track record. If you invest your money, you get an 8% return on investment. That's actually pretty good. The other, you have a 15% return on investment based on the track record. The other one, you have a 92% chance of return on investment. That's the typical track record. Which one are they going to pick? I mean, it's moronic to even have to ask the question. So even still, I'm just telling you, you're going to be up against a mountain of trying to get some money. And so, that's going to work different for every church, but you're going to have to find a way to get some money behind this thing in your own way. Just be ready for that, right? And the other thing I would say on just the front end, be ready for some resistance. And as you put your leadership team together, and let me tell you what I mean by that. It's almost universally true, I would say. I've never been in a church where there wasn't some level of resistance to, or getting the stink eye for, well, why are we just targeting men? And it just makes, I've gotten to where I don't even address it. You know why? Women are awesome when it comes to, women are so much better than men when it comes to finding what we might call biblical community. Women will find each other. They will gather. They will meet one another. Men don't do that. Men are loners and isolated. And so churches are pretty much, if it wasn't for women, man, we wouldn't have a lot of churches because women do a lot of the work. And so churches put a lot of their money on students and kids and women. But if you're just going to, there is tons of stuff in most churches for women and a ton of stuff for kids and students, but there's rarely much of anything at all for men. And so it's a non-starter for me. If people don't get it, they don't get it. Just keep going. Just be ready to say, hey, we have a lot of stuff for women and kids and students, but we have to have reaching men. And so move on. But just be ready for that. Okay. All right. Next segment, we're going to get into what it means to be event-driven and how that works. So if you're going to have any form of men's ministry in your church, it's going to be event-driven. It just is. Men connect by doing, and that's how they become people who are connected by being, but it starts with doing, and that's just the reality of the situation. I've just seen it too many times to try to see anybody refute that. So what I would say, because it's event driven, whether that's a wild game dinner or no matter what you're doing or how that looks in your church, here's what a couple of best practices I would say in far as in knowing that. Let's start with just what it means to sync up your events with other events. I would say the number one thing that I see as a speaker and even as a consultant at times over the years is, and I've done that for churches, more than once, and come in and just help them look at their leadership strategies and reaching men. But I would say churches tend to plan events that are outliers. They just have a wild game dinner, or they have a big, clay shoot, but they don't really connect the dots to how that could lead to other things. And so what I would say is, if, because you are going to have events, what I would say is make sure that you have something coming behind that event. And it doesn't have to be a big something, but have a way to do that beyond your follow-up. The next segment, we're going to talk about follow-up. But before we do that, let's talk about syncing up your current event with something else. Let me give you a good illustration of that. So several years ago, I was speaking at this church in Virginia, and they had a pretty big wild game dinner, and so I was asked to come speak at it, so I did, and so they, at the time, I had just produced this 6-part DVD series for Zondervan called Close Encounters, and it's Bible study. It was one of the coolest projects I've ever gotten to do, and had a lot of, Will Primos was on there, and I had Tim, I think Tim Harold was on there with me with the bear hunt. I can't remember all the guys we had. I've done a lot of those, and so it's kind of runs together, but I know it was some really great hunts. And what we did is the idea was you could put the DVD player, have it, it's like every small group class had one of those. And so you'd put it in there and you'd watch it. And I walked you through, it was actually just a Bible study, and so guys were doing it at their duck clubs, guys were doing it at their hunting clubs, and in their front end. One particular group before archery season, they would do a segment of, they would shoot their bow from like 5:30 to 6:30 in August, and then have, a few guys, and then they would go inside to a guy's den, and they would go through close encounters. Man, I remember that one particular church, I think it grew, and, they had probably end up, 15, 20 dudes shooting their bows. And so I'm going to return to some more of those things that are going to be free at jasoncruz.com. So you're going to be able to have some more of those events or some of those resources in the future, the short future. But so by the time you're hearing this, it may already be on my website, but that's coming in the next few months. But here's my point. The Virginia church, what they did is they had, at that particular church, they had a lot of factories around their church, manufacturing facilities. And so they said, our particular town, I thought this was genius by their pastor. He said, our particular town, we kind of move with the shifts. We have, the morning shift, the midday, the second shift, and the third shift. And he said, so what we're going to do is we're going to offer close encounters on, in the evenings, after work, but we're also going to offer it at noon to catch people coming off the first or coming off that midnight shift. I forgot how they did it, but it seemed like noon, middle of the day, was a good spot to catch that second wave. And man, when I spoke at that Wild Game dinner, they talked about, hey, we're going to have close encounters if you love to hunt. And so they had a lot of non-believers at it. And so they offered close encounters as an intentional follow-up. And they talked about it at the actual event. And it was starting 2 weeks later. And it gave them 2 weeks to do all their follow-up. And I talked to that pastor the next year, and he said, man, it worked so well to have something that led into something, one thing fed another. So I would just say, when it comes to your events, there are two critical components that we often do not do. One is we do not have a plan of how to get those guys back that we're reaching for Christ. Number two, we don't follow up well at all. Churches, I don't care if it's kids events, student events, women's dinners, I don't care what it is. Churches are notorious for just not doing well when it comes to follow up. So let's talk about that. Now let's move into how to actually increase your engagement of people showing up at the event. Now, this isn't marketing. This is just how can you actually do a better job of making sure they show up. And so there's a couple of things I've seen over the years that I think really work, and I'm going to share them with you. There's two, I think, key ways I've seen this done as I've spoken at events and just gotten to know event planners and people. There's a lot of people that are really good at events, and I would say there's a couple of key things. One is I would say use RSVP. There's a lot of debate over should we charge tickets for our men's event or our Wild Game dinner or our outreach event. Should we charge for it? Me personally, listen, that's not a biblical thing. Let's don't make something biblical that's not. Okay. I'll be honest with you. I have watched it go both ways. For me, I think you have a better turnout if you charge a little money. And I'm going to tell you a different way to do that where you don't have to charge a lost person for their own evangelism. Right? You see what I'm saying about that? I don't think it's good to charge a lost person for their evangelism, but there is a way you can do that. But first, I can say make your tickets even $3 or $4. There's just something about having a little bit of. Now you can charge them for the food, right? Now remember, you can't charge them for eating wild game. You can't, but you can't have a ticket price. You got to be really careful with that. Watch your state game regulations because you can get. I was speaking at an event one time and a game warden showed up and he was super kind to that church. He's like, "Hey, you guys are having deer meat here and you charged a $10 door charge," and he said that's a federal violation, but I don't think he actually prosecuted them, but man, you got to watch that. Just check your state regs. You can do a donation or whatever, but just watch that. Nonetheless,
What I would say to you is having an RSVP system really is easy, and you can do that online, and that just lets you know. Because the last thing you want to have happen is 500 dudes show up, and you've got 400 food for 472 people. You do not want to run out of food. By the way, I'll tell you what I've seen churches do that can cover you on that is have you about 15 to 20 pounds of pulled pork sitting over in the refrigerator, that if you notice you had a big turnout and the guys just show up unannounced, which does happen, you can always bring out some hog and warm it up real quick and have some barbecue sandwiches and some chips and get by. So I would do that. But let me tell you a funny story. This is kind of funny, man. When I was in seminary, I was looking for a job, and I wasn't I pastored my first church in Texas. I went to my master's degree. It was at Southwestern Seminary, and it's in Fort Worth. And so I was in between. I had just moved out there, and I hadn't found a church. I hadn't been hired at a church yet, and so there was an ad in the paper for being a professional speaker. I thought, well, man, I've always been good at talking, so hey, here we go. Now, what I did is this group was a financial aid organization that helped parents find they would basically think of it like an accountant. You know how you pay an accountant to do your taxes? Well, what this group would do, you paid them a fee, and they would go hunt down college financial aid for you, but they needed speakers to do their presentations when they would have them across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I did that. But these people were master marketers, and I saw them do something, and they made us do this as speakers, and I was like, I kind of didn't want to do it, but they're paying me, so I kind of had to. But I was like 23, 24 years old. But here's what they did. So let's just say that I was going to be at the Hilton tomorrow, and I was the keynote speaker to do the seminar on kind of what this service is provided. So you might have 15 to 100 parents come. But what we did is we took the list of people that had signed up, and they ran split tests on this, and man, it worked. They went for about a year where they would have all these no-shows. Like they have 50 people signed up and 20 actually showed up. Well, they started having us call on the day before the event. So the event was always on a Saturday morning. Well, on Friday evening, if you were the keynote speaker, you had to call that call sheet, and 7 out of 10 times you got the answering machine. But let me tell you something, buddy. I remember the first time I did that, I had like 50 families to call, and I made those 50 phone calls probably in an hour, because most of the time they didn't pick up. Had left a voice machine, a voicemail. Our attendance was like 90%. It was crazy how effective that was. So just use that call sheet the night before and divvy that out among some of your people, or just now you can use text messaging. You don't even have to call them. Just copy and paste a text, but make it personal, and that really, really works. So let's talk for a second about tickets and how that goes down. So what I would say about tickets is, here's the most effective ways I've seen many churches do it like this, but what I would say is, if you want to have a ticket, here's what you do. So let's say that every table has 8 people. Let's say that you have a standard table, a round table of 8 people. Okay, then you ask your men that, hey, listen, the tickets are $5 a piece. Okay, so a table for 8, obviously that's $40. So your men that are in your church, they actually spend $40 of their own money, and they buy tickets. Now, what they can say to their buddy at work, hey man, what are you doing next Saturday or next Sunday or whenever the event is? Oh, well, I don't know. We hadn't thought about it. Well, hey, I bought you a ticket if you'll just come. I bought you a ticket. There's something psychological. There's a little leverage there that if they accept that ticket, well, they know, oh man, Michael bought that for me, and I kind of need to go because he bought it. Now, they don't know it was only $5, but I mean, $5 ain't nothing. I mean, so I can tell you that does a couple things. Number one, it puts the guest on the line, and they tend to show up because they don't want to let their buddy down, and he paid for it. Number two, it gives your men some skin in the game. It makes
makes them go, oh man, I bought these things. I got to fill that table. And so it really does work. So I would say in terms of how to increase attendance at that, I would say those two ways. And now we go back to email, right? Now, but you've also, if you've done this for a few years, and if you did it last year and you got an email database, guess what you've got? Now you've got a database of guys that you can send, an announcement to as well. Email is key. And so just keep using that. And I think your attendance you're going to see that turn out to be a little stronger. Okay, so we talked about the front end of any event. Let's talk about the back end, the actual follow-up methods, because I think there's some pretty key strategies there too that make your event truly better than most, that take it to the next level. And that's what you want. You want to, if you're going to close this thing out, man, you would never hit a baseball. If you hit one over the fence, you want to step on home plate. And that's what it's about with follow-up. I think the most effective way I've ever seen follow-up done has to do with churches that have a follow-up team who aren't involved in the event planning. If you're the event planner, if you've been on the immediate team planning something like any men's outreach event, you're exhausted. I mean, you've been working 6 months to a year. I have seen churches keep their follow-up team out of the planning until just a few weeks before the launch. And the reason is, man, they got all this energy. They're like a coon dog that hadn't hunted in a year, just let me off the truck tailgate, But I would say if you have a follow-up team and their only responsibility is they're not involved in any of the leadership planning, it is literally just they're knock it out, man. You're at the end of the thing, and that's where the real stuff really starts. So I would say it like this. There's a couple of key ways you can do that. One, there's all kinds of Bibles out there that are, camo Bibles, and even if it's not a camo Bible, you can take any of the camo Bibles and you can take it to that person's house. So, or just a good solid NIV, a decent sized Bible. So if a guy named Mike came with one of your church members named Robert, man, you on the follow-up team, y'all get in your truck, just run by his house and drop that off one evening, and don't don't go in. I would say don't even go in the house, no matter what he says, unless he just presses it, but just take him a Bible, take him something like that to keep up with him. And there again, having a follow-up sequence event is a really big deal too. And so having those kind of things work and having those things planned out well, having a team that's all they're thinking about, it'll go so far. One more thing I would say is the power of that email address. Getting their email address lets you put them on your other event, blast and things like that. So I think just a strategic effort to make follow-up and have a fresh team to do it is the key. Let's talk now about the best times to have your event. I get that question a lot. And, I can tell you what I've seen just over time. As a speaker, it doesn't matter to me when, I'm flying in or I'm coming in, so I don't really care. But I can tell you what I've seen in terms of just sheer effectiveness. I think anymore with the rhythms of life and the way that things work, I think Saturdays are really a difficult time. Man, you're competing with honeydews and travel ball and really maybe even hunting, or fishing. So, you're just competing with a lot on a Saturday. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you're going to have just like, let's say a wild game dinner, let's take that for instance. Okay. I can tell you your best turnout is going to be a Thursday night, a Tuesday night, or a Sunday night. I don't know if I was going to host one. I don't think there's no way I'm probably going to do it on a Saturday. I'm just not. Sunday night is super effective, because people are kind of winding down. Now you do have the possibility of travel. Now I can tell you, anymore, you're competing with something all the time. I don't care what it is. So really you got to pick a date and go. There's just no good way to do it. And sometimes that also has to do with your region. Like, man, when I go up to Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or something like that, or
or Minnesota, if I'm speaking at, let's say, a Wild Game Dinner, if it's in February or March, man, it's still dark. I mean, it's cold. So, a nighttime event is a good time for people to get out, and come do something. They're itching to do something, a lot of times. But I would say a Sunday night, a Tuesday night, or a Thursday night. Honestly, a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, I can tell you I've seen a lot of churches that moved to a Thursday night venue and saw their, turnout increase dramatically. I've just seen that happen many times. So I would just say, put it this way, anything but Saturday. But I would probably, in this order, I'd probably go Thursday night, Sunday night, or maybe a Tuesday night. But I would say Thursday night, Sunday night, where probably you're looking at your best turnout if you're just doing like a dinner and a speaker. It also holds you a little more accountable because you can't do something a long, long time. You got to get in there, have the speaker, have the dinner, and get in and out. And it makes it kind of run a little more efficiently. So let's get into this idea of how to choose a speaker. Man, it never fails, and I'm happy to do it. Typically when you speak somewhere, you speak and they say, hey, who would you recommend? So let's get into that, and let's talk about how to go about finding a speaker and securing one. I mean, let's face it, a good speaker can make an event way better, and a bad one can make it way worse. You do want to find a good one. And I'll tell you, one of the great ways to do that is ask the guy that's speaking. I mean, I bet you 80% of the time that night, I mean, when I'm at the event and it's all wrapping up and I'm saying goodbye, they'll say, hey man, who would you recommend for next year? And I always have 2 or 3 names of people that I recommend that I know will do a good job sharing the gospel, but they're also a good hunter. Or they're good outdoorsmen. So let's talk about what makes for a good speaker. And then we're going to get into pay and pay scale and all kinds of things like that. The first thing I would say is understand that you've got to have the right kind of speaker. Because you just cannot have somebody, if it's a football coach or you're getting like, a Dabo Swinney, let's say, or somebody like that, well, then everybody knows he's not a hunter, or maybe he might hunt a little, but I see a lot of churches make that mistake. They call it a night for outdoorsmen, and they can tell, listen, it's a dead giveaway if a guy knows how to hunt and if he's actually a hunter. Let's flip it for a second. Just because a guy is an outdoor industry personality, that doesn't mean they are going to do a good job sharing the gospel. They're a Christian, but they don't know how to share the gospel well. And, or maybe they just bring it up. I've seen this happen a lot. People bring in somebody and they're like, oh man, this guy's got a hunting show or a YouTube channel or whatever, or he's a game call maker and he happens to be a Christian. Or you'll see churches will do this a lot. Oh, we'll get old Gary. He's the next county over. He's a good taxidermist. He loves the Lord. He's a good old boy, but he's not a speaker. Listen, if you're going to spend the money and the time and you're doing all this work that leads up to that moment, you need somebody that can actually deliver the goods. And I don't mean that to be like, some big rock star. I mean, the only rock star in this whole thing is the one that came out of the grave, right? I mean, but they need to know what they're doing. And so I would just say, be really careful. A lot of your outdoor industry personalities, even those that are Christians, are introverts, or they don't really want to speak at a crowd. So just be careful with that. One other area that I can tell you is something that I do see a lot when it comes to the speaker and who's doing the speaking. Man, I don't have a number for this, but I have seen it. Man, if I were putting a number on it, I bet you 30 to 40% of the time is what I call the pre-speaker. Maybe you owe a favor to, as the event planner, you owe a favor to a certain sponsor or a certain vendor. And sometimes I've just seen churches do it where they bring up some guy, hey, Jason, before you speak, there's a guy he's just really funny and he's a local guy and he's going to tell a hunting story. Well, he told you he was going to speak for 5 minutes and he went for 15. I mean, they never just speak for 5 minutes. Hey, we're going to have the local game warden. I've seen this happen more than once. We're going to have the local game warden, or we're going to have such and such turkey caller. He's going to give a 5 to 7 minute seminar. Well, it's never 5 to 7 minutes. And then, so now you've got the next speaker. And so they have sat through 2 speakers and man, I would not do it. I've seen them do it so many times, and it just tends to never go well. If you want to have, maybe you want to have a vendor speak, or you want to have somebody give an insight to the community or the local bass fishing report, man, do that while they're eating. And then you have a natural break for 10, 15 minutes until your keynote comes up. So just be mindful of that, because it tends not to go well. Now let's talk about some of the mechanical aspects of securing a speaker. The first thing I would say is get a contract. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything special. And in fact, most good speakers are going to have one anyway. There's different agencies that I work with, or that'll, kind of represent me, or, but most of the time it's just coming from me. And my contract's 1 page, and it's the furthest thing from legal speak, but it's clear. Here's the speaking fee. Here's, if you want me for 2 or 3 days or a men's retreat, then here's the extra day cost, and here's how travel's arranged. It's a single page, but it's clear. And here's the deposit and that kind of thing. And I would just say, I promise you want clarity. You really do, man. So get a contract no matter what. Now, as far as pay scale goes, I would say on the low end, I would say expect anywhere from $500 to $750. That's really low. I would say, here's the window. I would say $750 to $3,500. That is your typical speaking fee range, by my estimation, unless you get into somebody more that has like a sports background. Let's say you're getting a former Major League Baseball player. Well, okay, if you're going to go through a bureau like that, you're going to pay, $5,000 to $10,000. And if you're going to try to get, somebody, pretty well known, like a college football coach or something, well, then that's gonna really take on a whole different meaning. But you're doing that for the draw. So, but I would just say expect somewhere between $750 on the low end and $3,500 on the higher end. Or I should say that's kind of the range of normal. And so I would get ready, kind of to be ready to pay for that. And that's plus expenses. That's not, hey, it's $2,000 and that's all of it. No, unless you just tell them, hey man, my budget's $2,000 and it's, however you get here is on you. So, for me, anything that I do is going to be my speaking fee plus travel expenses. So that's how that's going to work. Now, and that's how most guys work, by the way. That's, it's your speaking fee plus travel expenses. So let's get now into hosting that speaker the day of, because this can be a big deal, and it'll be just a few common things I've seen on my side of the fence that'll help you a lot. Number one, I would say make sure he has a handler, as that's often referred to, somebody that has just, the day that person's on site, you need somebody that kind of just, somebody assigned to your speaker. And that person's responsible for things like, hey man, let me show you where to go. Let me show you where, where your table is. And also that person is somebody that knows that they're good at talking, but they're also good at reading people. You don't want just a loud mouth that's just, all over this person, but what I would say is a lot of times, you're so busy. If it's you running let's say you're the one putting the event on and you're the guy responsible for being the tip of the spear, man, when your speaker gets there, I mean, he doesn't know anybody. So he's sitting, he doesn't know where to sit for dinner. He may be sitting by himself or whatever. So just have somebody that, hey man, your job is just to walk with that speaker and keep them in the green room or whatever you're going to use, Now let's talk about, as far as just travel for a minute. This is a really big deal, and I think I can maybe help you a little bit right here. I've done it all kinds of ways, and for the early years, if you wanted to come pick me up at the airport, that was fine. But I'm going to just tell you something. You are better off. I promise you tenfold. Trust me on this. Let the speaker arrange their own travel, and here's why. Number one, you and your main crew of dudes, man, they got too much to do, and having to stop on the day of and go to the airport and drive an hour and go get the person, and now their flight's delayed or whatever. I mean, it just doesn't work. Let them get a rental car. I mean, it's not that much money. It's, $50, $75. Get the rental car. Just it's in my actual contract. I will arrange my own travel, and here's why. I tell you where that started. Probably 15 years ago, I had some pastor come. He wanted to come get me at the airport because he wanted an hour with me to talk, which I actually love that. But guess what? He had something to do on the return. And this has happened to me more than once. Oh, we're going to talk to Bobby. Bobby's going to take you back. Well, Bobby wasn't expecting that. Now Bobby's a little bit fired up, or he's just like, dadgummit, man, I had somewhere to go, but sure, the pastor asked me to go take you back to the airport. And it just doesn't work. So I arranged my own travel. Also, here's another thing, just so you know, on my end of the table, a lot of times if I drove even 5 or 6 hours to get to the event, what you don't know is because you're amped up from speaking, I'm going to drive like 2 hours back in the direction that I just came from. Or if I flew in, I'm driving back to the airport. I'm going to drive back and be a local because I got a 5:30 a.m. the next morning. I usually if I'm flying, I get the first flight out every time so I can get back home. And so it's, nobody's going to want to come get me at the hotel there, in your local town somewhere, in South Carolina or Indiana, and then drive me to the airport at 4 a.m. And so it's just so much easier to let the speaker arrange their own travel. So I hope this helps. And as long as you're clear and get a contract and clear on who does what, you're going to go a long way on just making that whole thing go smooth. Let's get into something that I think is going to be hopefully very insightful for you. There's an article, there's a short post on jasoncruz.com called 6 Ways to Ruin a Wild Game Dinner. But this is really true for any men's event that you might host. And all of this I've learned by watching, right? I'm the guy that you brought in to speak, and I'm just telling you, I've watched it too many times, and I've seen some what I would just call recurring bad habits. And let's get into those just to keep you from making those. And listen, man, you've probably made some of these, and don't beat yourself up. I mean, it's part of it. But here we go. Just learn that we want to get better, right? So. Here's one of the first truths here's the first problem: taking way too long to give away gifts. Man, I will tell you, you want to talk about a vibe killer and a wrecker. You can be having this is what Peyton Manning would call. He called certain people on the defense. Peyton Manning called him a game wrecker. I mean, this guy can ruin your game. Well, taking too long to give away gifts can ruin the night. I've seen it so many times. I cannot tell you the number of times I've gotten done speaking and watched and sat there for an hour while they gave away gifts. There is just no reason for that. No call for that. No reason for that, man. And here's it's so easy to get around this. Number one, I think one of the reasons that happens is churches give away too many gifts, and that, hey, I get why you're doing that. You want everybody to win something. Hey, man, a guy doesn't need a pair of some hand warmers. I mean, like literally, hot hands or something. Man, come on. I would use my money more wisely. Give away fewer gifts and maybe nicer gifts. But here's the simple way to get around taking too long to give away gifts. Give gifts away all night long. It's so easy. So once the guys get going and they're eating, while they're eating, have somebody go up to the microphone, draw out a ticket. Hey, ticket number, whatever, you've won this. And then you have runners, and they don't have to climb over everybody. Have 5 or 6 dudes that are there, and they just walk those gifts out to the crowd. Raise your hand, I'll come over to you and bring it to you. Or, hey, when you get done eating, come up here and get your gift. You can do it that way. But just don't take too long to give away gifts. Here is a second, I guess you'd say game wrecker. We'll just go with game wrecker. Here's another game wrecker, right? MCs that hijack the event. I have seen this happen probably, I would say 50% of the time that I go speak at an event, there's usually an MC, which is a really great idea. It keeps the event moving along. But if you've ever been to a charity banquet or anything where there's a true MC, man, there's a real art to that. And they're funny, or maybe they're just good with crowds. But they also, here's what a good MC knows. You know what a good MC knows? They are not the speaker. That's what a good MC knows. They're not the speaker. And so what I would do is make sure that you don't get somebody that loves to hear themselves talk, because I've seen that. I wouldn't say I see it all the time. I don't, but I've seen many times where you get a good old boy up there and that MC, and I tell you where I see it a lot is when they're giving away gifts, and they give away a gift. I can't believe old Bobby Ray won that. Let me tell you something about old Bobby Ray. And now he only tells you something about old Bobby Ray for about 45 seconds, but he does it all night long. All of a sudden, his stories about every other person that comes up there has added 15 minutes of needless talk to your event. So I would just say, here's the solution. Have an honest conversation with the MC. Hey, man, you can find a kind and classy way to say it, but you're not the keynote speaker in disguise. You're there to move the event along. So be careful for that. Here is another way that I've seen churches have game wreckers, and that is what I would say events that overreach. Wild game dinners, or really any type of men's event, since it is event driven. To put it a different way, they try to do too much. I've seen this happen a lot, man. The event is supposed to be a night for hunters, right? Well, then they have inflatables for kids, and then they have vendors, and then they have all these things, and homemade beef jerky people, and then they have the guy doing the archery display, and he's going to, it's too much, man. Remember what you're there to do. What is the purpose of a wild game dinner? Share the gospel with hunters, right? Get them in there and share the gospel with hunters. Well, then let it be that, right? Let it be that. Honestly, you really don't need to have anything more than an hour and 30 minutes. An hour and 30 minutes. Let me tell you something, man. I want you to think about something, right? Do you know that the average, like NWTF, National Wild Turkey Federation, do you know what their average time is for a participant, for somebody that actually paid to get in the door? I think it's like 47 minutes. Like the average person stays in less than an hour, and that's the last statistic. That could be a little longer now, but I mean, you're not, and that has maybe 1,000 booths of everything from Remington to Chevy trucks to Realtree and Mossy Oak and gosh only knows who else. I mean, you just be really careful that you don't try to do too much in one night. It just isn't going to go well for you. And I see a lot of churches try to do this thing with vendors, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But what I would say is have the dinner, have the speaker, and get out the door. You don't have to be in a hurry. Just remember, man, people don't want to be there for 3 hours. You've got to have, a rock concert, with a great famous band, they play for an hour or less. And so just choose discipline there, right? And know what you're doing, have your event, and move on. Let's talk about one more game wrecker. And that has to do with vendors a lot of times, but I would just say opening the event too early. And that's a surefire way to get people never to come back, or even worse, they never hear the speaker that you paid good money for that person to come. Here's why. If you tell people the doors open at 5, that's when they're going to show up. That's just human nature. That is simple human nature. And I have seen churches so many times open their doors at 5 and, we've got vendors. Well, what you had was maybe 10 to 15 booths of the local Quail Unlimited chapter, the local guy that makes beef jerky, the local knife collector. And that person can walk through that in 7 minutes or less. And okay, so now I've got there. Now it's 5:07, and we're not even going to start eating till 7, and the speaker comes on at 7:45. Let me tell you what they're going to leave. Okay, they are going to leave. You did all this work. You actually got the lost person, the people that don't know Jesus. You got them to your church, man. And 3 hours later, you're just finally settling into a speaker. I can promise you, man, they're not going to do it. They're just not going to do that. So I would be really careful. And if you are going to, I do see a lot of churches go down this vendor idea. They think it's going to be a way to attract people. And it kind of is, but understand something. Think about a flea market. Do you stop at every single booth? When you go to a trade show, do you stop and spend 10 minutes at every single booth? No, you don't. You walk past them and you may stop and look at 7 or 8. Well, if you've only got 10 or 15 booths, they're not, 90% of the stuff that person isn't even interested in. So just be really careful that if you do have vendors, fine. The event opens at 6. People can, encourage them to go out in the hallways and see the vendors, but don't separate that as like its own event. The vendor event isn't an event. The vendors are there to dress up the event, but they're not the event. So just keep that in mind. Let's talk about another game wrecker. And I would beg you, just please don't do this. And that is what I would call turning a men's outreach event into a clandestine worship service, or as I call a worship service in disguise. Man, I've seen this a lot. You have some music there. You got some people playing some bluegrass music, or you got some Southern gospel people there. And now you got 1,000 men in the room, and, 300 of them are guests, and you finally got them there. And, and now some dude stands up there and he's singing, and all of a sudden he launches into Beulah land. Y'all come on and give the Lord praise tonight. Now let's all stand up and give the Lord praise. Guess what just happened? I call that ambush evangelism. And so what happens is you told them they were going to have a night for outdoorsmen and for hunters, and really what they got was a worship service in disguise. And I don't care how much camo you put on a worship service in disguise, people don't like that. All right? Don't do it. Don't do it, man. They don't like being lied to. And I know that's a harsh word, but I'm telling you, if you knew you were going to do that, then tell them this is a night for worship for Christian hunters. You know what? Now I can come and I know kind of what I'm getting. But if you're going to offer it up to be a night to reach outdoorsmen, then man, it does not need to have Beulah land and, all that good stuff. Okay. You need to follow through on what you said you'd do. And then you're going to be a lot better off. Here is, I guess, really, I've mentioned a couple others, but I would say 2 others. Just remember, failure to follow through is a way to ruin it because you did all that work, and so just be really cognizant of having that follow through. That can ruin an event on the back end, and you didn't mean to. You were just tired. So I would finish with that. Just make sure you have a good follow up team, and then you're going to be. I'm going to add one to that. I'm going to add one more. Man, okay, so I'm just we're going to turn this into group therapy. I'm still in trauma from that. This was like a long time ago. And let me tell you what happened, man. I'm going to add one to this. Have really good media, audio, tech, have good stuff. All right. Let me tell you about, this is probably the worst event I ever attended. And it was everybody's fault and I guess nobody's fault, truthfully, but let me tell you what happened. So a few pastors did something I thought was really cool. I wish all pastors would do this. These pastors went in together. They were all at different churches, and they went in together. And they said, why don't we all have wild game dinners? Why don't we just go in together? And if we're going to share the gospel, let's do it. Let's do it. We have a better budget. It was so smart. There's a lot to learn from those 3 guys that did that. Well, they combined their budget. Well, all of a sudden, they called me like a month out, and they said, hey, Jason, we're having to move the event venue because this thing went from like 500 people we're going to have like 1,500 people. And there's only one place in the whole county to do it, and it's at the Ag Center. I'm like, man, this is awesome. So I travel down there. It's in a different state, and I get down there, and they are in a rodeo arena. I'm talking about straight up Lane Frost rodeo arena, dude. And I'm like, holy cow. And they had packed that sucker out. But here's where it went bad. They literally did not want to spend the money to hire a sound crew. Well, first of all, God's done this big thing. You thought you were going to get 500 people, and all of a sudden you got 1,500 people. Man, this is a hallelujah moment. Well, you need to find a sound crew to come from the closest big city that knows how to put up sound. Because let me tell you what they did. They put a microphone in my hand, and I was on the rodeo arena PA system. And you know what it was like? It was just like this. Hello, hello, hello. I'm Jason, Cruz. Good to see you. Hope you're here tonight. Good night. I mean, it. As soon as I started speaking, I stopped and I looked at those pastors, and they were dying. I'm like, fellas, come on. Are you kidding? You didn't think to do even a sound check? I mean, it was so bad. I mean, I could not believe it. And I was heartbroken for them because they did such a good job. And that's one of those places. I don't care if you have to dip into your church budget. God has done a big work. Man, they could have gotten a local band and rented out $100 worth of sound equipment, done better than that. So I would just say, really make sure. Think about it this way: what good is the gospel if nobody can hear it? And what good is the gospel if the audio's so bad that it's a distraction? So just pay the money and do it right. So those are a couple of key ways I would say that you can really ruin an event. So let's move now. Let's finish this thing out with what I would just call one of the best practices I've seen on how to have a consistent men's ministry. And we're going to wrap it up with this. So as we close this thing out, let me just give you what I would consider probably the best practice of consistent rhythms of ministry for men that I've seen, and something that we even do at our church. And that is what I just call it, the quarterly grab and go. and let me tell you what that is. Most men's ministries are a breakfast. I don't know how that happened. It's like there's a trademark, maybe there's a patent in all evangelical churches that a men's ministry is basically a annual breakfast, or ever. Some of them even do a monthly breakfast. That is, listen, fellas, a monthly breakfast is not a men's ministry. Okay, that's a breakfast. That's all it is. It's a breakfast. You got to have some intention behind that. But so what I would say to you is, what we do is once a quarter, we have different affinity groups. We have a golf group. We have a hunting group. We have a fishing group. We have a history group. We have an entrepreneurs group. And we have all these different groups based on your passion. And that's actually what my doctoral dissertation was about. It was about men's ministry that was passion driven. Because here's what I've learned. Passionate people do not need to be motivated. They don't need to be motivated. If you're passionate about something, you're just going to do it, right? So, and you love it. You're going to do it no matter what. You're going to spend money to do it. So what we do is quarterly, we have, and we don't even always bring in speakers. Sometimes we just have it local. So here's how it works. You show up on a Saturday morning, and we actually have a Cracker Barrel catered breakfast. It's not that expensive, and so we do that. So the guys come in, and then my dog Stella's neat. I told you she was a diva on the front end of this thing. She comes over here wanting me to be pet right in the middle of a segment. Go. So the guys come in, they get a breakfast, and for about 30 minutes they talk. Sometimes we've had some country music singers. We have some songwriters in our church. That's gone over real good. They'll do like 3 or 4 country songs that they're writing, and that kind of adds a really cool flair to it. But really, within about an hour, you eat a breakfast, and then you go. So we start at 7 o'clock, and by 8 o'clock you're out the door. And what you do is you go do your thing with your dudes. So let's say it's a hunting group. You're going to go to the sporting clays, or maybe you're going to go to the pistol range. Or I've even seen some churches. That one church I know did something really cool. They had a doe day at the end of the deer season in our state, where you can kill does a lot anyway. And so what they did is you go on a doe hunt, and then you got points for how many does you could kill. In our state, it's 3 a day. And they would give away really nice Bass Pro gift cards, but they would come back to the event that night. So what I'm saying is, you put a date on the calendar and you do something quarterly. That's that was a big swing for the fence. But you don't have to be that big of a fence swinger. You can literally just have your event, send out your guys. And so what you did was you get them all together. They're all together. They get to see one another, 50, 60, 75 dudes. And then all of a sudden, they're going out playing golf, doing their thing, but they get to put a date on the calendar. So you started on the front end of the day, and they don't come back. We don't, no, when they're done, they're done. But that quarterly grab and go, they grab some food and then they go do their thing with their respective, dudes. I mean, man, that really has worked worked well, and I've seen that work well. So that would be what I would say is probably your best model. So think about it. If you do the quarterly grab and go and an annual wild game dinner, man, you got 4 to 5 solid events with follow-up that really give you a pretty healthy men's ministry there, man. It can really take off on itself. So I would encourage you to use that model. God has called men to be the leaders of the home and of the church. And fellas, I want you to know I'm so proud of you. If you're listening to this, you have a heart for men. And I would just say, please go step on the gas, do it more. Or maybe it's been sluggish at your church. Don't quit, man. Don't quit. If you reach the man, you do reach the family. And I'm just begging you, please keep staying in the fight. Just stay in the fight and do what you're doing. It is making more of a difference. You know, sometimes if you go back and look at what Jesus did with the parable of the sower, you know, sometimes we sow and sometimes we reap. What did Paul say? I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So when it comes to sharing the gospel, there's sowers and there's harvesters, and that's a natural rhythm in and of itself. And then there's actually even cultivators that cultivate in between planting and harvest. So just it takes everybody to sow and sometimes to cultivate and sometimes to harvest. So just stay in it, man. It's doing a lot more than you realize it's doing. And I just want you to know, for one, even if I've never met you, I mean it with all my heart. I'm proud of you. And if nothing else, one day we'll hug in heaven, right, brother, man? Hey, I love you guys. I do. But just stay with it, man. Stay in the fight, and we're going to see the kingdom of God come on earth as it is in heaven.